Hello, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Now, as of today, which is the 8th of August 2024, there's been many riots happening in the UK. And when I mean UK, I don't mean just England. I mean, Ireland, Scotland, England. There's been a massive kind of far right riots that have been happening and a lot of Islamophobia and xenophobia. So kind of just making this video to, I guess, explain kind of how the rise of it has happened from, 2020 onwards, because 2020 was a pretty significant year. So I feel like going from there kind of makes sense. And yeah, just kind of want to get into that, explain from 2021 to now, and how basically this isn't just a surprise thing. This has been brewing for quite a bit of time, and now it's properly reached out into the streets. And as of today, there's been a lot of also anti-racism and anti-Islamophobia riots, and how basically the support for anti-racism is a lot higher than, those far right idiots. So yeah, getting into all of that today. Right. I guess a bit of background is that there was this party called Britain First, and I mean, as you can tell by Britain First, the title is pretty, you know, racist. That was quite popular. I want to say the 2000s. But yeah, Britain First was quite a popular party. Far right, leader was racist and far right, and then it moved into kind of UKIP, which is the UK Independence Party, which was headed by Nigel Farage, who, if you don't know, Nigel Farage is a very bad politician and racist, and then kind of doesn't admit to his racism, and it's just really annoying. And then that party was very popular in the mid 2010s, around the Brexit time and stuff like that. And then that eventually split off and made Reform UK, which was founded in 2018, I think. And then, yes, during this most recent general election of 2024, they have gotten a lot of votes, also headed by Nigel Farage. And they've got seats in Parliament. They've got I want to say the third most votes in this general election, but very few seats compared to the Lib Dems, who got less votes than them but got more seats. So which means that obviously the system we have in the UK is very bad, but also we can't just ignore how many people voted for Reform UK, who have policies such as making it more expensive for international students to come to visit and study here, restricting their family coming here. They don't support women at all, and just a lot of brain dead policies basically, which just hinder a lot of people who might be seeking asylum or might be migrants here. So boo. Yeah, and Reform UK is kind of they've kind of just ruined the political landscape of this country, and there's a very telling sign of what this country might turn into if people don't address the right problems. If politicians, the Labour Party, don't address, the far right and how big they're growing. In 2020, we had a very particular, very popular thing that happened, and with that came basically the shutdown of the country and people having to stay at home, stay safe, 1 meter apart, 6 feet apart, and all of that. And then obviously we had the, people rioting over lockdown and saying, a lot of stupid people going out to the streets and protesting lockdown and saying it's stupid, we should be able to go out, we should be able to do things. Meanwhile, people are just dying at unprecedented rate because of what happened. And yeah, it's just kind of a lot of, white working class people kind of just going to streets and protesting, not really know how bad this virus was and stuff, and how the riots were kind of just a mirror of what happened in the US with a lot of the riots, and how the UK was basically the US but on a smaller scale. And that's kind of a big telling sign of hey, the UK is not doing good right now, doing really, really, really bad. And then we get into like 2021. A big thing was like the rise of younger people getting into extremism online, because obviously, you're at home, so you spend a lot of time on the internet, and obviously, you know, the far right kind of like pipeline that I've talked about before, they kind of like use that as a type of like, radicalization to get people online and get into that pipeline and start, supporting ideas which target minorities, and like how kind of COVID conspiracy theories just basically were being used to lure young people into like their group and their kind of like ideas and putting ideas in their head. So that was like quite a big thing, and how a lot of stuff that was like intervened before like it happened, it was due to like a lot of young people getting, radicalized online. And now we get to 2022, which is the year of Rishi and the Conservative government saying bye bye immigrants, bye bye asylum seekers, which is basically just they plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda, and then they put them on like this barge which was floating in the middle of the ocean, which was windowless and just like a terrible idea. And also just like you can't expect people to first of all just live on a windowless barge and be happy there. Not even happy, but like that's not a safe living space like at all. That was like, how can you expect people to live there? Like, why can't they go live there and see, can they survive there? Can they be happy there? Can they, have some sort of normalcy on a windowless barge? And then about sending them to Rwanda, like Rwanda isn't like a country that is able to host, asylum seekers or people who want to come to the UK to get a better life. Like it's a third world country, and like it's not suitable. And I feel like they must have known that, but I don't know why they did it anyway. Like they must have known that and it's not a good idea. And obviously eventually it just didn't work out. Like it was stopped because you really think that's a good idea. Like, come on. And then here we see, a big start in the anti-migrant people who, started to take a lot of action towards, migrants, and especially the hotels that they were staying at. And the reported amount of anti-migrant activists that were reported at migrant accommodations was 253 times that they went there, which is 102% up from 2021. So even in 2021, they were still doing it, but like 102% up from 2021 to 2022 is insane. Like that's a big, big jump in numbers, and also like kind of, starting to see a bit of a pattern here. And during that year, 2022, Nigel Farage filmed a video at hotels that were, housing asylum seekers, saying, "We don't know if some of them are ISIS." And then in the year of 2024, our great year that I'm living in right now, he was like, "I'm not stoked, I haven't done anything racist or stoked any of like this fire. Like this is not my fault." They should just play a clip of him literally saying that, like. And then like him going on I'm a Celebrity to try and like rehabilitate his image and kind of like be this kind of goofy guy is just so like ITV. Come on. Like Nigel Farage is not a good person. Like minorities in the country hate Nigel Farage because of what he's done. You're gonna put him on a pedestal and try and like it's on like the same level as Matt Hancock going on I'm a Celebrity. Like why? Your brain. And then obviously Nella Rose, confronted him, and then people started hating on Nella Rose for a bit. But I'm like, she's right. People do think you're racist because you are racist. Put two and two together, Nigel Farage and racism, right there. Like your party is literally far right twice. So we got to 2023, and this was kind of like a lot of pro-Palestine protests, and how there was a lot of people who were against the pro-Palestine protests, including the government as well. Because like the Tory government in this was not obviously doing their job and stopping the far right. Like they were either adding to the fire or stoking it, because like they would arrest people willy-nilly. They arrested people who spray painted the road and like arrest them because they were damaging the road, because they care more about the damage of the road than, being like complicit in killing 180,000 Palestinians. Like, come on. Like, you've got to see that and be like, at some point, like, what are we doing as a government? Like, yeah, a lot more far right candidates will also stand in local elections, kind of like, Reform UK and stuff like that. So it wasn't just like a surprise, kind of like, oh my God, Reform got this many votes. Like, 2023, they were standing in local elections. People don't really pay attention to that as much like general elections. So like, it was kind of growing behind the scenes, and kind of like, obviously now with Nigel Farage being the head of Reform UK and him being quite a popular politician for the wrong reasons, that's when it kind of like just hired a lot of, people who agreed with him to stand in those elections. And they came second in like 98 places, which is insane. Absolutely insane. And they got like 2 seats in Essex, so. Don't get me started. Do not get me started, mate. And then, yeah, obviously Rishi, saying a man is a man and a woman, like, just being transphobic, really. And then that obviously kind of like just puts ideas in people's heads and kind of like makes the far right more into the mainstream and seem like their ideas are actually good when they're not. So then we get to the year 2024. Now that obviously the Tories are finally out, Labour's in, but they're kind of just like a own brand Tory party at this point. They are so close to the centre, and they are not kind of like left really anymore, because a lot of like what Keir Starmer's done and like a lot of people in the Labour Party just like terrible. But yeah, over a decade of Tory rule, I mean, like no support for poor people, this whole kind of like society is working for the rich and the few people, because the society is for a few people and for nobody else, even though it was built on the backs of many minorities, even though like that should not be the only reason why you're like, oh yeah, I'm signing up for minorities. You should sign up for them regardless. But yeah, and obviously, cost of living crisis, which affects everybody, especially people who don't have as much, income coming through. You've got the tabloids and headlines, blaming migrants and black and brown people for a lot of problems and a lot of like lack of opportunities for the working class, white people especially. And it kind of just like putting that idea into their heads that, yeah, migrants are the issue, they're coming in, stealing our jobs and stuff like that, which, yeah, just kind of like they are the problem. They just keep on feeding the fire, stoking it, stoking it, stoking it, and then put on a headline saying, yeah, look at the anti-racism programs for like protesting against the thugs, which I hate how they're saying thugs, because like that word is really only reserved for criminals, and a lot of them are just like regular people, rich people who are, basically have far right ideology, and it kind of just gives them a scapegoat to be like, yeah, that's not me, when it is you. So, and I guess all of that kind of like, I guess, culminated in the very sad attacks that happened in Southport, where 3 young girls were killed. It was in a Taylor Swift party. 3 young girls were killed, and then false information was spread that it was a radical Islamist migrant. Basically, that false information was fed to anti-immigrant terrorists. I'm not going to call them like protesters. No, they're terrorists at this point. And yeah, they descend onto in Southport, Middlesbrough, Liverpool maybe, but like a lot of towns, kind of just like rioting, setting fire, causing people to stay in their homes, just beating up on random, black people, brown people, basically just like checking cars to see if they're like white so they can let them through, which is insane. Yeah, the attack, they've said it's not terrorism related, and the suspect was the one in Britain. I believe it was Cardiff. So I think, yeah. So like that was just completely false. That was a radical. Like they were born here. They are, you know, British. So kind of like the room was completely false. Like based in nothing. I don't want to be like. I don't want to bring this up just because it's like a talking point, because it is very sad and tragic. But a young 14-year-old black boy in London did die due to a white man carrying a sword and killing him. and it's terrible, and honestly it should have never happened. It barely even really made the news, maybe for like 1-2 days, and like basically you didn't see any of those far right people kind of like condemning it and being like, you know, this is just a lone person with that ideology. And I think he was talking like shouting about God or something. And in the UK, the majority of people are white, and the majority of people are Christian, I think, but also no religion is also like a majority. So like I'll show it somewhere. But yeah, they're just so contradictory to the point where it like affects lives and affects people as they grow up, and like young children. And like even then you have like children in Belfast who are shouting obscene language whilst going to a far right demonstration, which is just insane. Like shouting it down the street.
Really embarrassing that you bring your child and let them say something like that. Like really embarrassing. You're teaching your child racism, teaching your children racism, teaching your child good for you, bringing your baby to a protest. Disgusting.
Is that what you're teaching your children, to be proud of that? You know, like I've heard a lot of people saying, oh, you know, people, migrants, you know, they come here like they're nurses, they're doctors, you know, they're the backbone of our society. But then you shouldn't only care because they help you. You should care because they're people, you know, they could be unemployed, they could be working a minimum wage job. You know, it shouldn't only be because, you know, they could be this. Like, you should just care because they live here. You know, they're part of a society. That child, they're going to go to school with that in their brain. How are people, you know, who are South Asian, who are black, you know, who are minority, how are they supposed to integrate properly when you have children like that shouting? And it's just one video that I saw, but like, I can imagine the amount of families who are kind of maybe like teaching their child that stuff, or like even not, you know, saying, oh, you shouldn't do this to like their white child. We need to teach more about, you know, anti-racism, and teach more about like, okay, this is the history of the UK, and teach more just about like be more accepting, because it's not even just like a woke thing or like, oh, it's like leftist stuff. Like, no, it's to show that you should care about people. It's to show that in a society you should recognize that there is multiculturalism and that you should respect people, because that's what you should do. Like, these children could be in high positions, and it's not just like working class white people, like I said in this video. It's, you know, people in power, politicians, people who are in charge of like, you know, Daily Mail and stuff. Like, they approve those headlines. So on a positive note, in Brighton there was like 4 far right like terrorists who were like, you know, trying to do like rioting, and then like there was an obscene amount of like, you know, anti-racism, anti-xenophobia, anti-Islamophobia protesters who were there, just completely surrounding them. Beautiful picture. In Walthamstow, the same thing. Beautiful picture. Like, it is great, but I still think we should not, you know, be like, oh, okay, that's it and done, because like, you know, as we saw in the 2024 election, Reform UK got so many votes, so like that kind of is scary. The future can be scary, but I think right now we'll take the wins, but also we should look to the future and be like, okay, we need to change something in this country on a massive level, so that, you know, this stuff doesn't happen again. Yeah, that has been my video, kind of like documenting the rise of the far right in the UK, and how we are just like 5 years behind the US, and how the far right in Europe are in government already in some countries. So, yay! Make sure you like, subscribe, and comment, and I will see you in my next video. Peace.